degree of open sourcing, a greater degree of communication, a greater degree of cooperation, a greater degree of team learning, team building, team functioning. That has to be good for more people. We haven't had such an accumulation of wealth in so few hands since the Depression, and it's bigger now than it was during the Depression. So something like 1%, something like half of 1% of the population, I'm not sure of the numbers, have something like 80% or 90% of the wealth, planetarily speaking, right? And if you include the top 1% of the population, it goes up to like 97% of the resources are controlled by like something 1.5 or 2% of the population. So a very small number of people are sitting on a vast amount of wealth. And everybody else is sliding. sliding. I like the environment, sliding. More carbon dioxide, more pesticide, more biodegrade, environmental degradation, more, etc. Right? This is not sustainable. This is not manageable. This is not working. And so evolution always tends to get pushed big at a crisis. It's like we seem to be crisis animals. And so Peter Sensei, in his book The Fifth Discipline, talks about this in terms of time lags. Now, what else do you do when you don't want to face it? You shift the burden. So we shift the burden. We shift the burden onto? Where do you shift the burden onto in terms of the economic community?
The corporations.
The corporations. It's the corporations' fault. But the corporations are made up of people. Right, like you and me. Right? We work there because we're going to try to maximize wealth. We figure, it's the old hierarchical model. If I work for IBM and I get enough money, then I'll be the president of IBM, and then I'll buy IBM, and I'll own the world, and it's mine! Which is not the way Duncan thinks, but that's the way probably most people think, right? So that system doesn't work, and we're getting to the point evolutionarily where it can kill us, right? It can wipe us out, and so the shift is moving, including Harvard Business School and MIT, to that people like Peter Sensei can be heard. I mean, who is the guy? Copernicus? Was it Copernicus who is maybe going to be fried for saying that the Earth wasn't the center of the solar system? I mean, he messed with the paradigm. And Peter Sensei, in his way, is messing with the paradigm that systems thinking, right, the fifth discipline, right, is the new way of organizing, managing people, right, and NGOs and non-profits or not-for-profits, if you better term, perhaps, right, and internet free flow of information and communication. The Chinese are trying to sit on it. Is the way of the future. And to do this, our brains are going to have to deal with the fact that we have spindle cells and mirror neurons, that we're not as separate as we thought we are, that it's not a hierarchy. I'm the boss, I'm the great Lama, you're the student, so on and so on, right? And this system has to go, and it's going. And the younger generation, arguably, is going to have a lot less tolerance for the hierarchy and the top-down management system than my generation did. And my generation, I guess, the baby boomers, were the first real generation. The beatniks, you had the beatniks and stuff, but they were kind of a sub-genre or something. It was really the hippie generation who stood up and said, no, we're not doing this Piscean model anymore, and we failed miserably all over the place, but still something happened. And then since then, every generation is more and more is coming group mind, group guru, group functioning, right? But of course they don't have the training for it, because the whole nature of state capitalism is divide and separate. How else do they get you to go to work? They get you to go to work by telling you, if you don't pass your school, you fail. If you don't get this, you fail. If you don't do this, you fail. Then if you don't go to work on time, you fail. And if you don't do your job the way we want you to do it, you fail, right? So the fear and intimidation runs state capitalism so that the wealthy can get super wealthy and you can work for them, right? So the rebellion against that is understandable and ordinary, right? But at the same time that you're rebelling against state capitalism, what are you not doing? You're not organizing. You're not creating alternative. You're not building a new paradigm. You're fighting against the old one.
Fighting against the status quo.
Fighting against the status quo rather than creating the new status quo. So what I'm arguing here this morning is don't put so much time into fighting the old system as organizing, coming together as teams and groups to create the new system, right? This is going to be a challenge for all of us individually because it's beyond our comfort zone. It's beyond separation. It's beyond the stability of the old, and it's moving towards something that seems unpleasant from the old paradigm, but is going to make it much more pleasant for everybody in the future if we succeed. Yes.
How does one evaluate or measure social skills when they're so different from one person to the next?
Well, we don't. I mean, the whole idea of evaluation is ranking. Right? And ranking means top down. This is better than that. Right? So you don't need to evaluate social skills. What you need to do is develop social skills.
Just thinking about that, because you said at the Harvard Business School,
yes.
What they're looking for is that. I'm just wondering how one finds that.
Well, let me give you an example. The United Nations works with many different people from many different nations with many different languages. Fair enough? It's a very diverse organization. And corporations like IBM make machines, right? Or Ford makes cars, or something. So the management of that is you know how to make a car, or you know how to make a machine, right? You're not very good with people necessarily. I'm not picking on these. I'm sure all of these companies have had great people with great social skills, but not really. I mean, Steve Jobs' social skills were close to ape-like. Kind of a rat, really. And Watson from IBM was kind of a rat. Right? They were all, Rockefeller and Vanderbilt, in terms of social skills, were kind of rats. I mean, they weren't. Anyway, but for the time, they were what was required. So, back to the United Nations, they're looking for MBAs, management people with management skills, business administration skills to run their various departments, and their one of their top, how do you mean one of number one? Anyway, one of their top locations for looking for people are the University of Saskatchewan. So my brother, who is now dead, right, was headhunted 5 times by the United Nations to come work in New York. Why Saskatchewan? Farming community, working together, barn raising, relaxed in coming to work in blue jeans, having things not work, having people kind of a little dull, the prairies. It's kind of like, hello, working with restraints that are, in other words, better social skills, curiously enough. Now, I'm not calling my brother by any means a socially skilled person. I mean, that would not be a label I applied to him. Lovely guy in many ways, but social skills, no. But he had the combination. He had he'd show up at work in blue jeans. Friday was blue jeans day. Working with people from farmers to natives, right, to college-educated crowds. So a broader range of exposure. It wasn't just this little world. So curious, and Canadian again, so more willing to, less willing to lead, I guess. The Americans more leader. I'm gonna run it, and prairie people more, arguably, relatively more cooperative, having to work together to, because your resources were, I don't know, whatever. You get the idea anyway. Whatever. This may be unfair to both sides, but you get the general idea that they found that the people that came out of the prairies of Western Canada, when they went to a foreign country, they didn't say, this is the way you're going to do it. They're more willing to learn. I'm not sure that's true anymore for Canadians, actually, but it used to be. Actually, Canadians have become the ugly Americans internationally. They so wanted to not be dominated by the Americans that they became the Americans. And the Americans, having lost a few wars, have become a bit more humble. So curiously, the Canadians internationally are seen pretty much as ugly as the Americans were in the 60s. And I've certainly met my share of them on the road. Obnoxious, brash, loud. Anyway, that's beside the point. So, that's it. Are you willing to listen? Can you listen? Can you present? Can you interact? Can you let go of your boundaries in order to hear something new? Work together? Can you get over your fear of redundancy? Can you get over your fear of being rejected? Can you get over your fear of being a failure? Can you get over your fear of not being in total control? Yada, yada, yada. All state capitalism, these are rewarded. Wanted, aggressive, initiative, leader, smart, talented, educated, king of the universe. I mean, that's what they're asking for, right? Pay $5 an hour. Who are you working for? Right? So you've been trained that way, state capitalism. You've been trained to be a cog in the machine of the capitalist organization from the day you were born through public school, high school. It wasn't about social skills, it wasn't about cooperation, it wasn't about team learning, it wasn't about, other than the football field, I guess, or the synchronized swimming team or something, right? And even then, the synchronized swimming, the mastery of the synchronized swimming was being able to do it with other people as an individual. In other words, what made it amazing was that all these individuals could do this thing together. That was the amazing bit. Not that they did it together and that they were individuals. Flip it around. You worked really good as a team, and you had an individual skill, right? It was the individual skill working as a team, right? So again, the movement's going to be the other way. That what you accomplish as a team is going to be more important than what you are as an individual. And in fact, that's what corporations are. That's why corporations have emerged evolutionarily, because they build something bigger than the individual, that the corporation lives the corporation lives on after the individual dies, right? This is like a kind of immortality, right? And the precursor for that is what's the precursor for the corporation? The nuclear family. Mommy and daddy have 2 kids, the kids live on, right? My kids are my immortality. Right? So you can see the step. So corporations, again, are mostly interested in product and profit, right? I got to move on. And the social venture, or whatever we're going to call it, the NGO or the Sangha business, right, is, the monastery that lives on after I die. And remember, during the Dark Ages, what carried you through? It was the monasteries, right? They were the source of economics, they were the source of social cohesion, they were the source of education, they were the source of spiritual support, I guess. Huh? We can look back at the monasteries in the medicine, healing, questioning even, in some ways. At least they were the most, up until the Renaissance, they were the most questioning minds around. And once we came out of the Dark Ages, then we could come out of the monasteries, right? Well, arguably, you're going into a Dark Age. And that the social organization has to become what the monasteries were in the Dark Ages. It has to be the spiritual center. It has to be the economic. It might have to become the economic center, the social center, the environmental center. Right? Because you got these people that are doing great work in the environment and social organization, right? But they still can't relate to each other personally. Right? When they go home, right, they're still caught in the paradigm of the great individual, right? The marriage as an institution isn't working because it's a Piscean institution for a time to manage resources, right? So you see it's falling apart. It's just not working. So anyway, this new thing, how it's going to look, we don't know, but we do know it's going to involve management. Why? Training. Why? Because more complicated, more interconnections, more things can go wrong, more feelings can be hurt, more toes can be stepped on. It's going to be a struggle, and it's not going to be pretty, right? But it's inevitable. Otherwise, state capitalism works and we're all wins and we're all dead. So, in the past, your talents were employed by capital. In your future, your talents will be employed by community. In the past, the old was the tantric kind of idea. In the new, it's the glass bead game. the glass bead game becomes the new Tantra. Hermann Hesse's idea of a glass bead game, bringing all the elements together in a new way. I remember, oh dear, I have so much to say in so little time. In the old days, the tantric idea was bringing together the male and the female from the point of view of the isolated individual, me, or you, living in your body over there and my body over here, separate, independent, fixed, me, right, and her, right, over there, separate, independent, fixed, and the whole idea of bringing those things together in union, not just physically for babies, not just productively for the farm, but spiritually for the sense of a transcendence of the separation, isolation thing. The old model was tantric. The new model, right, has to be more community, more groupish in a way, right, and therefore it will have to manifest different talents. So, evangelists and Maya and Ruth are kind of dancers, and I don't know, Stephen and Cheryl and whoever are kind of artists, and Catherine and Duncan analysts. I mean, obviously you're not just one thing. I'm not trying to pigeonhole you. You can only be analysts. You can also dance. It's okay, right? But the Ruth and Maya and evangelists going to have to learn to manage, right? So in other words, so your talents now come together as a community, support for the community rather than support for the corporation, because the corporation will kill us. So in the same way that the nuclear bomb would kill us. So the corporation has to go, or it has to be redefined, and that's what Harvard Business School is trying to do. It's trying to redefine the corporation as a social, cultural, environmental, and economic entity, right? And Peter Sensei is an example of how that is trying to get into the business world. Now, Peter Sensei himself will admit that he hasn't really seen any successes, or not much, over 20 years. Over 20 years since his theories were presented, he hasn't really, as I understand it, hasn't really seen a success in the business world, because it's changing the paradigm. So you too should think that way. As a emerging group guru mind, you're not going to see a lot of success probably in your lifetime. Now, if I take you back to Noam Chomsky in his book called Understanding Power, which I recommend to you if you can get through it, he argues that it's not the great individual who makes the movement work. What makes the movement work are all the small group of people working year in and year out tirelessly. Tirelessly. Yeah, I know. English, it's not my first language. Tirelessly. We're not sure what my first language is, and when we find out, we'll let you know. But I don't think it's English. Anyway, tirelessly, right? Behind the scenes, unknown, unrecognized, right? And what's your Piscean model say? President, King, Tiger Woods, Llama, big guy, right? Old model. Gone, get rid of it, move on, right? I mean, it has to be incorporated, surely. So, Llama mind becomes the mind map, where you might think of it as a Sufi dance, right? Where in a Sufi dance, everybody's whirling, and the master's job is just to kind of walk through the bits. And their presence kind of holds the bits in some sort of cohesion. So now, rather than the Lama being the goal, right, that the bits moving and working together is the Lama. And in the Western mysteries, in the Eastern mysteries, the Lama sat at the front, up on the pedestal, the Pope, whatever. And in the Western mysteries, the master of the lodge often didn't occupy the central chair. In fact, often in the Western mysteries, nobody knew who the master was. Curiously enough, right? That in the group mind, the master steps out of a leadership position in the sense of the hierarchical thing, and becomes that consciousness that moves through the group in a way to hold it together, to pull the bits in, and to you might say troubleshoot or put a finger on where the problems are, and that's an administration job, right? Okay, so the new one is the glass bead game. Relationships, in the old form it was two people or a nuclear family. In the new, it's got to be a marriage of a group. It's got to be the group working together. We're not talking sexuality here for the moment. Just leave that hot potato off the table, right? But as chimps here in the room, there wasn't much fornication going on, and chimps are always fornicating because they got to survive the group, right? So now, when you have 6 billion people, well, sex doesn't become so important, does it? Because you got enough people there. So sexuality or sex drive seems to be decreasing. They say that young men have the sperm count. Young men today have the motility in their sperm count of 60 to 80-year-old men, right? Because there's less of a drive for procreation. Yes.
Is that maybe nature or biology's way of addressing our overpopulation?
Yeah.
Because women's fertility may be down too, right?
Well, certainly in developed countries. There's an inbuilt nature has a brain too. Although it's probably not a self-aware brain, which is why nature created us. But in Western, that's not true. In what did you call it? Developed. In developed nations, birth rates plummet. Anyway, so the old was 2 people, nuclear family, the little farm community. Right now, it's like the corporation, which is now in a corporation. The printing press emerges. By the way, when the printing press emerges, your group changes. Now, in the old days, you had Germans and French, and then you had the printing press, and you got the Bible. So you had people in England who were Christians, and people in France are Christians, right? Now, Christian is the new paradigm, right? It doesn't matter whether I'm French or I'm German or I'm Italian, I'm a Christian, right? Or a Jew, especially with the Jews, whether you're Russian or Scandinavian or Canadian or whatever, the Jewish thing is the Bible or the book, right? So in capitalism, the book is Profit, right? In the new paradigm, the Aquarian age, the book is community. It's just, there's no other way. Otherwise, we're dead. It's either community or death. Either a slow one through global warming and state capitalism and the great individual, or a fast one by the collapse of the ozone and so on. In the old, the product was, from our point of view, our particular point of view today, in the old, the product was the awakening, the monastery, the teacher, right? The lama, the abbess, the abbot, the pope. And the new one, it's the awakening. The awakening in action is the teaching. Awakening through your actions, awakening through your behaviors, awakening through your community is the teaching. The teaching is the awakening in group, right? Not the, That's the product. The new product is group mind, right? The awakening through community, the awakening through group. The individual is going to be terrified of that, right? It's the end of my individuality. It's I'm going to be redundant. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not special enough. Therefore, I'll be redundant. They won't need me, and they'll throw me out of the team. Because in the old, that's what happened. If you weren't smart enough, if you weren't fast enough, you weren't pretty enough, you weren't productive enough, right? You were thrown out of the team. So the fear is real. But in the new paradigm, we don't need the smartest, the brightest, the talented. We need open source. We have a problem here at Clear Sky. The person who solved it is, speaking of which, where is he? The person who solved our little problem wasn't the carpenter, wasn't the person with lots of experience painting or carpentry, or the person who solved the problem was
the new guy.
The new guy, Priyantha. He doesn't know anything. I mean, he's learned how to sand while he was here. Okay, just cut a notch in the newel post. That's that post that sits next to the stairs, and you just notch it out, and then at least you get the post off the mantle and the floor. Nobody thought of that. Not nobody was here anyway. So this open sourcing, this everybody has a place, right? So how do you value talent is not maybe the right way to phrase it. It's like, what is the talent? Everybody is useful. Everybody has something to offer somewhere. And if we only value management, we're into state capitalism. If we only value the leader, so in order to make this work, what do we need? Team learning. Otherwise it fractures, it falls apart. You go to the next job in the next company and you get your money, right? And you know, the minute the shit hits the fan, where are you? Isolated, alone, and separate, with no support mechanism, no family, no group, nothing holding you up, right? It's a death sentence. So, in the old days, how did you market a product? You sold it. Right? You sell a product, right? In the old system, marketing was selling a product. In the new one, it's offering a process. You know, the old model was Baryshnikov and I don't know, Martha Graham. Is that? Am I in the right field?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Right. And in the new one, it's the synchronized swimming or the dance as a story. Right. Right. It doesn't mean that one person might have more talent than the other, but their talent is best used. Right? We've already seen all the great dancers dance. So what? Now we want to see the community. That's what we go to. We go to see a bunch of people put together a story and a movement, right, that everybody can relate to. Right? Just seeing, you know, how much who can you see can jump a little higher? Okay, Baryshnikov jumped 8 feet, and Evangelist jumped 8 feet, won gold medal. Right? And this is reflected also in reality TV. Yeah, young people got tired of, okay, the hero gets the girl and they have love and they run off and they're happily married. We've been watching that for 60 years. And my parents and all my parents' friends and all their friends are all divorced, so there's something wrong with that movie. Right? Right? So they've seen all the stories. They've heard. They want to see what people do when they have to eat cockroaches, or put on an island with no clothes, or have to stand on one foot for 4 hours. And, you know, we don't care what the fuck it is, as long as it's real. As long as it's something that real people are doing, and we see what real people do, right? Which is why you watch TV in the first place. Now, what does she do when she's in the bathroom combing her hair? Right? I mean, that's what TV is. Don't say Rinpoche called himself a voyeur of the inner. Right? And it's like, you know, we're all voyeurs. That's why we watch TV. What would those people do in that circumstance? Right? So the nature of team learning, right, is that in order to get to team learning, you got to get past whether somebody sees you pee in the woods, or someone sees your genitals or something. I mean, that's like Piscean. You know, we got to get to the point where what you're looking at is how are our spindle cells and our mirror neurons relating to each other in order to produce a product that is sellable, which is the process. And the process defined in the old days was the awakening moment. I will become awakened. Old product. New product is we are awakening. We are awakening. Training. Your work hasn't started yet. Right now, this is my work. Your work's coming. What time is it? Oh shit. Okay, in training, the old training was to meditate, learn the virtue, sila, samadhi, and punya, right? The new training is functionality. How does it work together? How do the parts fit together? Right? How does the farm work together? How does the grasslands work together? How does the meditation center work together? How does the construction work together? How do the people function together? Right? If we don't have that, we're back to Piscean estate capitalism, and what we have is a lot of buildings with a lot of individuals coming through, showing up, meditating, going home, and going back to state capitalism, where all of a sudden they get schizophrenic because their spiritual life and their economic and social life are not on the same page. Nobody wants that anymore, especially, and young people more so, because they're young people, right? They'll be redundant. It's all right, you're redundant, and Ruth, you're redundant in about 10 or 15 years. I'm kidding. Ownership before was, by definition, private. Ownership in the future, public. All right, I have to jump to your homework. So what I'm suggesting is we create a new product. And we create a product called the process of awakening. And the process of awakening isn't the great Lama doing all the teaching. The process of awakening is bringing together and developing a community process with different talents, functions, and tools that work together so we sometimes say here that we have a quadruple bottom line. That our bottom line is social, environmental, economic, and spiritual. And most spiritual organizations are either only interested in spiritual or predominantly interested in spiritual. I mean, to a vast extent. And then financial organizations are only interested in money. They might marginally be interested socially, environmentally, but only because it helps them sell computers. And it's not their... So I thought about this the other day. We thought about this the other day. We thought about this the other day, and we came up with the idea that we don't have a quadruple bottom line, we have a single bottom line. The single bottom line is life is a process, or life is the product, right? And we have 4 arms. Life through environment, life through sociality, life through economic, and life through spirituality. So in order to make the good life, if our product is the good life, right, then it has to have 4 aspects. And if any one of those aspects are missing, you don't have the good life. You have a distorted kind of good life. Because you might want to add, you can add in a 5th. These are just ideas, right? I'm not preaching. There might be a 5th arm or something else, but you get the idea. So, in the old paradigm, I do my job. In the new paradigm, what we do is the job. You get sort of the feeling? All right. So what have we got available as talents? Who feels they know a lot about astrology? You put your hand up.
Relative. Okay, sure.
Come on, relatively. Who feels they know? You see, this is why it's not going to work. Because the guy over there is the professional astrology. He's got a business. He's the astrologer. This is exactly my point. You are the astrologers. Come on. People who know something about astrology. Hands up. 4 of you. Okay, people who know something about music. Yeah, 4 or 5 or 6 of you, right? People who know something about art. Okay, look at you, 7 of you. Now it's working. People who know how to build something or have some talent in building, another 6 or 7. How about farming or agriculture? Okay, plants, etc. The penny's gone. The marketing, our plant people have left, some of them. How people know about Jung, psychology, the CAPS thing, controller, analyst, promoter, supporter? How about psychology? Anybody know anything about psychology? How about the Enneagram? Any people know about the Enneagram? How about hero's journey? Anybody know something about the hero's journey? How about the message matrix? Anybody know anything about that? How about the ladder of engagement? Somebody know something about that? How about the 5th discipline? Anybody know anything about that? How about language of love? Anybody know about love languages? How about appreciative inquiry? How about agile? Well, our only agile guy, just found out this yesterday, left for the market, so he's now in agriculture. But how about the 5 dysfunctions of a team, or Maslow's pyramid, right? Or dance movement? Anybody know anything about dance or movement, or choreography? Or how about Facebook, LinkedIn, communication skills? How about theater? Anybody into theater? How about tarot? Anybody know anything about tarot? How about CAPS? How about the Myers-Briggs? Anything know about that? Will you stop going somewhere else and start doing what you are and working together to be that rather than thinking it's out there? Please? So we can create a life, a good life. I had my temper tantrum. Did that help at all? A little bit of fire to kind of, Come on. Yes, you know a lot about astrology. You taught it. Right? Quit being humble. If you're being humble, you're working for the man. He's made you humble. Oh, you're not so good. You're not capable enough. You're not smart enough. We don't have a product. We don't have anything to sell. We got to go to the lamas. We got to go to the Rinpoches. We got to go to some other place that's going to, oh, he wrote the book. You write the book, you're the expert. Jerry Coppola in Winnipeg was the only guy who had written a book on architectural photography. Right? So he got offered a job at Harvard. because they went looking for someone who knew something about architecture. Well, how is Harvard going to find someone who knows something about architectural photography? Are they going to call somebody in Winnipeg? No, he wrote a book. Write the book. We're going to write the book. We're going to write the book called Group Guru, and you guys are doing it. Now, Evangelist said last night that he was at something or other. What was it? What was it called? You went to something or other, and you said everything they were doing we already did or doing.
Oh, at the Sacred Commerce workshop.
So Evangelist went to a sacred. Did Maya go? I don't know. But anyway, Evangelist went to a thing called the Sacred what?
Sacred Commerce.
Sacred Commerce workshop. 50, 60, 100 people there. He said the only thing they had that we didn't. We doing everything they're doing. The only thing we didn't have was a
Capital investment.
Formula.
package. Yeah. And then a presentation. That's all. So that's your homework for this weekend. I want you guys to start working on a product. I want you guys to do it, right? I want you guys to develop, and I want you guys to learn to work together. And what's that going to recall for? Training. You're going to have to train yourselves to do. There's nobody out there to train you to do this. It's the Patagonian Indian. You can't go somewhere else, particularly to get trained to work as a group. You got to do the training, right? If you go somewhere else to get trained to work as a group, you're back into state capitalism. They become the state capitalism of training. And we don't want to own the training. We just want to market it. Not just to make money to build clear sky, right? But to help the whole civilization move into a place where we're going to survive. So you got to get over your nuclear family, individual ego, boundary, separation, isolation, you got to get over it. And if we don't get over it, who's going to get over it? I mean, we are arguably some of the smartest people on the planet. We are arguably some of the most talented people on the planet. That's why we're here. And we're not the only ones. There are groups all over, doing the same thing, right? But we have an advantage. We have the advantage of the meditative mind. We have the advantage of the awakening view. We have the advantage of recognizing the limitations of emotional, physiological, intellectual separation and isolation. We have already worked a lot on that. Much, much more than sacred commerce people have. No, we're not perfect. No, we're not finished products. No, and we won't be ever. Ever will we be done. We'll never be satisfied with our a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for, to quote the Burns. I think it was Robbie Burns. No?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Well, whoever it was, somebody said it. Brown? Brown?
I'll find it.
All right. You get the point? I have to end here, I'm afraid. So, we could go on, but the idea is, my idea anyway, is our idea, I hope it's our idea, is team learning, team function, team training, right? Stop making Sensei, the Lama, the Rinpoche, the consort do all the training. Sensei shouldn't need to remind Cheryl and Stephen to take pamphlets and remind whoever has the pamphlets to give it shouldn't be doing that. And it should be automatic. We're a team. This is what we're doing. This is what we're on about. We should be training each other. All of you have certain areas where you can train other people. It's like Isabel spent 30 years in social work. She's got some idea about tragedy and death and dying and terminal illness, and that's useful, because from the point of view of our group, you are dying. As an individualist, just me alone on my own, it's a corpse. Now your fear, of course, is you're going to be subsumed, and call it redundant. but you're going to be subsumed and you'll lose your individuality. And I'm going to make an argument here that's going to be hard to swallow, perhaps. Right? But I'm going to say that you'll find out who you are as an individual when you join in a community. Not the other. You're not going to lose your individuality, you're going to find it. What you have before the group is isolation, fear, terror of being overwhelmed or overpowered or unloved, right? And I'm going to argue that if you actually join in the team, join in the group, you'll find your strength as an individual. That somewhere, somehow, even the worst of you has some sort of talent of some kind, which will prove very useful at just the point where it's needed. Have some trust in that. So how you organize this and how you put together, that's up to you. We've got the genesis for it in many areas. We've got the grasslands and the farm and the building force, and it's there. Is it going to be painful? Yeah. Don't complain. Tell that to the ape coming out of the tree that got eaten by the tiger. Tell that to the Patagonian Indian who got raped and mutilated and enslaved in the corporation. Tell that to the guys working for Hudson's Bay Company. Tell that to the soldiers on the marketplace of the stock exchange. Where did you ever get the idea that it's not supposed to be painful and difficult? But the dukkha, sabbi sankhara dukkate, all formations are suffering. But what transcends suffering? Your vision, your dream of a good life, right? And so the road to good life is along the path of trepidation and terror. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for my community is with me. Anyway, there's my pep talk. Any questions? Yes?
I just wanted to clarify about our homework being...
Hold it. Don't ask me.
Well, are you saying...
Ask each other. Okay. Shut up. Ask each other what your homework is. Okay. Yes?
Thank you for a really inspiring class. Which is great.
Yes.
Yes?
Who's training who?
Everybody's training everybody, and it starts with the people who have the most training. So if you've got some training, train others, right? Train who you can train when you can train them. And if you meet somebody who knows something, take the training. It's like, it starts here, right? The Lama, the consort, it extends out. Who has had the most training in this group? Right? Take the training where it is, from whoever it is. If I'm going to go to dance class, I'm not going to be the trainer. Right? If I'm going to go listen to things on grasslands, I'm not the trainer. Right? So where is the person's training has an advantage? Take that training. And in terms of team training, right? Who are the people who are working in teams? If you're not a team player, then take your training from people who are team working. If you're not a communication person, take your training from people who are trying to communicate. Okay. All right. Yes.
You mentioned that in the Western mysteries in medieval times, the master often was not known within the group. And I'll offer that was partly for protection against the status quo and against potential persecution. And the question is, moving into the Aquarian age now, can we foresee more of a backlash, more repression of progressive ideas? And is that another reason for protecting our gurus, or our masters? Yes,
but you are the gurus. I mean, the thing you got to come to is, inspiring class. That's my guruship. Right? But I don't know dick all about all sorts of things, right? So yeah, you're partly right, but it's also partly that the Aquarian age is, like any new age, is going to be fraught with suffering, and there's going to be a huge fight to hang on to the old, and a huge challenge of the new, and that's within house, let alone out there at large. So yeah, it has a purpose, but it's also inherently evolutionary in its own right. I mean, you really got to come to terms with the idea that the guru is not held in a person. Yes.
Peter Sensei in the workshop said that the leader or the master is like a host, and that they own the house and they've invited you and they know where things are, but often they'll disappear because they're the busiest person there. So they're not, you don't need to be afraid of them or even necessarily worship them, but you go to them because they know the most in that particular container.
Yeah, I think is what I just said. I mean, you know, who has the best connective tissue? Whose spindle cells and mirror neurons are working the best in this situation? I'm not going to lead the kitchen, right? But I would like to contradict his point in one way, because even the idea of leader is the old Piscean paradigm. Now we have
host.
Well, you said the owner of the house or something, and then there is no owner of the house. We own the house. It's our house. But this is where it's going to be difficult for individualists to step up, because as Catherine says, who's going to do the training, right? Well, you got to allow yourself to be trained where you see an advantage, which means you have to be open, right, to not being the great individual who needs to know everything, or at least not be told by somebody else, or the fear of being overpowered by mom and dad, or forgotten by mom and dad, right? Whatever, right? And so if you have a sense of this, a stronger sense of this, you go, okay, well, if I'm gonna want to be a better dancer, I'm gonna go ask Maya, right? I mean, it's proofs in the pudding, right? And so as a community, who has the best community view? Who has the most connective tissue in terms of community? So those are the people that would be, like Catherine and so on, would be the people who are pushing the most for that, right? So okay, when it comes to connection and working together and communicating and all that stuff, right? Then I'll go there, right? If I want to know about the accounts, I go to Michelle or Maureen, or if I want to know how to paint, I go to Martin, right? This is okay. This good, right? And then you guys have to work out, like, okay, well then, if we're going to make a product, what do we need a product? Somebody keeps asking me for an internet educational based Buddhist, for lack of a better word, program. We could create it. We could create the model for team learning, or a model for team learning. We could create a model for a community working together. We could create that, right? And in the process of meeting our monsters, we would be creating the very thing they need, because they can't, or they didn't, or they haven't. Right? So in order to create that product, what do we have to overcome? Our idea that it's somewhere else. Now and this is the whole point of the marketing module that Catherine and Karen and Duncan and I don't know who all, if I'm missing your name, I'm sorry, right? Catherine and Karen and John.
Anthony.
And Anthony, sorry. I mean, I'm sorry if I've missed your name, but have created that we are the product. You got to get to this. I am the product. Linda is the trainer. Linda's been, she's been in Japan as a student working in this modality for 10, 15 years? 15, I don't know what. Catherine's been in it for 15 years, Martin's been doing it for 30 or 40, Stephen and Cheryl have been doing it for 30. I mean, we got the training, right? At least in terms of the understanding or contact with the awakening mind, right? Maybe Martin and Stephen and Cheryl and I aren't the best people to be leading the team learning thing, because that's not the way we were trained, right? We were trained to be independent, separate, get away from the herd, wake up, right? And that's fair enough. But now we're going to do it in group. It's inevitable. They won't be supported otherwise. You get people rolling in and rolling out. That's not the same thing. Right? So who's done that training? Well, Catherine, for example, has been living in a community situation almost her entire life. From when she left home, right? Living in, and others of you, I'm sure, are the same, right? Karen lived, right, in a group house with Catherine and I, for 6 years, was it? I mean, so let's look to those people look to those people who have actually worked in community and team and haven't had nuclear families, right? Haven't been on their own independent, right? You got to listen to your resources. If you can't do that, you'll never get anything together anyway. You'll have to go back to state capitalism, and money will drive you. If you want money to drive you, get a job. Right? If you want a good life to drive you, get a community. Right? And is it going to be difficult? Yeah. Is it going to be painful? Yeah. Is it going to be anxiety times? Oh yeah. But what do you expect? You're an ape. You're coming out of the trees. You're supposed to be afraid. And remember, negative impressions are stronger than positive ones because they have survival value. Now, being afraid of something has survival value. That's why it takes 5 good experiences to equal 1 bad one in terms of its impression in the mind. Because negative experiences have survival value. Threat, danger. Am I going to be overpowered? Am I going to be defeated? Am I going to be eaten? Am I going to be ignored? Am I going to be redundant? Much stronger than I had a nice day at the beach. It takes 5 beach days to equal up 1 fear. Right? Because of the survival value. So recognize that. You're going to be meeting some difficult things. Anyway, idam te punyakama maswakintu, idam te punyakama maswakintu, idam te punyakama maswakintu. Sabe sata sikitontu. And probably the person who has to learn this lesson the most is the Lama. Can't even get a microphone off.
Useless.
Thank you.
All right, so don't look at me, look at each other. May the Lama.
Dharma activities flourish.